Magic Treehouse, book number 12. Polar bears past bedtime. By Mary Pope Osborne. Chapter 1. Are you serious? Woo! The strange sounds came from outside the window. Jack opened his eyes in the dark. The sounds came again. Woo! Jack sat up and turned on his light. He put on his glasses. Then he grabbed the flashlight, came from his table, and shone it out the window. The white snowy owl was sitting on the tree branch. Ooh, the owl says again, its large yellow eyes looking right into Jack. What does he want? Jack wondered. Is he a size like a rabbit and a gazelle? The great long rabbits and the gazelles has led Jack and Annie to the magic treehouse for their last two adventures. Ooh! Wait a second, Jack said to the owl. I'll get Annie. Jack's sister Annie always seemed to know what birds and animals were saying. Jack jumped out of bed and hurried to Annie's room. She was sound asleep. Jack shook her up and she stirred. What? She asked. Come to my room, whispered Jack. I think Morgan sent another sign. In a split second, Annie was out of bed. She hurried with Jack to his room. Jack led her to the window. The sunny owl was still there. Ooh, said the owl. Then he raised his white wings and took off to the night. He wants us to go to the woods, said Annie. That's what I thought, said Jack. Meet you downstairs after we get dressed. No, he says go now, right now, said Annie. We have to wear our pajamas. I have to put on my sneakers, said Jack. Okay, I'll put on mine too. Meet you downstairs, said Annie. Jack pulled on his sneakers. He threw his notebook into his backpack. Then he grabbed his flashlight and tiptoed downstairs. Annie was waiting at the front door. They silently slipped outside together. The night air was warm. Moths danced around the porch light. I feel weird, said Jack. I'm going back to put on some real clothes. You can't, said Annie. The owl says right now. She jumped off the porch and headed across the dark yard. Jack groaned. How did Annie know exactly what the owl says? He wondered. Still, he didn't want to be left behind, so he took off after her. The moon lit their way as they ran down the streets. When they entered the Frog Creek woods, Jack turned on his flashlight. The beam of light showed shadow and shoving branch. Jack and Danny stamped between the trees. They stayed close together. Woo! Jack jumped in fear. It was just a white owl, said Annie. He's somewhere nearby. The woods are creepy, said Jack. Yeah, said Annie. In the dark, it doesn't even feel like our woods. Suddenly the owl flapped near them. Yikes, said Annie. Jack shone his flashlight on the white bird as it rose into the sky. The owl landed in the tree's branch, right next to the magic tree house. There was a Morgan Le Fay, the untransparent librarian. Her long white hairs gleamed in the beam of Jack's flashlight. Hello, Morgan called softly in the smoothing voice. Climbed up. Jack used his flashlight to find the rope ladder. Then he and Annie climbed up into the tree house. Morgan was holding the 3 scrolls. Each one has the answer to an ancient riddle that Jack and Annie has already solved. You have journeys to the oceans, the Wild West, and Africa to find the answer to those 3 riddles, said Morgan. Ready for another journey? Yes, said Jack and Annie together. Morgan pulled the first scroll from the fold of a robe. She handed it to Annie. After we solve these riddles, we'll become the master librarians, asked Annie. And help you get your books through time and space, said Jack. Almost, said Morgan. Before Jack could ask what she meant, Morgan put out the books and gave it to him for the research. She says, Jack and Annie look at the book's titles. Adventure in the Atrix. Oh, wow, Atrix, said Annie. Atrix? Said Jack. He turned to Morgan. Are you serious? Indeed I am, she said. You must hurry. I wish we could go there, said Annie, pointing at the cover. Wait a minute. We'll freeze to death, said Jack. Fear not, said Morgan. I'm sending someone to meet you. The wind started to blow. Meet us? Who? Said Jack. Who? Said the snowy owls. Before Morgan could answer, the trio started to spin. It spun faster and faster. Then everything was still. Absolutely still. Chapter 2. The Howling. The air was crisp and cold. Jack and Danny shivered. They looked outside the window in the dark gray sky. The treehouse was on the ground. There were no trees and no houses, only an endless field of ice and snow. Morgan and the owls were gone. Read the riddles, said Annie, her teeth chattering. Jack unrolled the scrolls. He read, I cover what's real and hide what is true. But sometimes I bring down the courage in you. What am I? I better write it down, said Jack, shivering. He pulled out his notebook and copied the riddles. Then he opened the book. He found a picture of a burned white field. He read aloud. The Arctic tundra is a treeless plain. During the dark winters, it is covered with snow and ice. In early spring, snow falls, but the sky began to get lighter. During the summer season, the snow and ice melt and the sun shines 24 hours a day. It must be early spring now, said Jack. There's snow, but the sky is a little light. He turned the page. There was a picture of the man wearing the hood's coat with four trims. Look at this guy, said Jack. He showed Annie the pictures. Witness his coat, said Annie. Yeah, said Jack. Listen to this. He read aloud. The seal hunters wore sealskin clothing to protect him from the icy winds. Before modern times, native peoples of the Arctic lived by hunting seals, caribou, polar bears, and whales. Jack took out his notebook. He wrote, The Arctic. Seal hunters wear sealskin. He was too cold to write any more. He clenched his pack against his chest and blew on his fingers. He wished he were back home in bed. Morgan said someone was coming to miss us, said Annie. If they don't come soon, we'll freeze to death, said Jack. It's getting darker and colder. Shh, listen, said Annie. A howling sound came from the distance. The more howling sound. The more. What's that? Said Jack. He looked out the window. Snow was falling out. It was hard to see. The howling grew louder. It was mixed with yapping and yelling noises. Jack and Danny saw dark shapes coming through the snow. They seemed to be running toward the treehouse. Wolves, said Annie. Great. That's all we need, said Jack. We're freezing, and now the pack of wolves is coming up for us. Jack pulled Annie to the corner of the treehouse. They huddled close together. The howling got louder and louder. It sounded as if the wolf were circling the treehouse. They whined and yelped. Jack couldn't stand it any longer. He grabbed the Arctic book. Maybe this can help us, he says. He searched for the picture of wolves. Oh, hi, Annie says. Jack looked up. He caught his breath. The man was staring through the treehouse window. His face was surrounded by fur. It was the sail hunter from the Arctic books. Chapter 3. Mush. Did you come with the wolves? Said Annie. The sail hunter looked puzzled. Did Morgan send you us? Said Jack. I have a dream, said The man says, You're in it. You need help. Annie smiled. Morgan dreams sometimes, she says. We came in Morgan treehouse. It flies through times. Oh, brother, thought Jack. Who will believe that? The seal hunter smiled as if he was not surprised at all. We do need help, said Jack. We're freezing. The seal hunter nodded. Then he left the window. He returned a moment later with two small parkas like his own. They were made of heavy dark skins with fur-trimmed hoods. He passed one to Jack and on to Annie. Thanks, said Jack and Annie. They put the parkas on. Hooray, said Annie. It's warm. Yeah, said Jack. They're made of sealskins. Poor seals, said Annie. Don't think about it, said Jack. He pulled his hoops up. His head and upper body were very strong now. Only his legs, hands, and feet were still freezing. Oh, thanks, said Annie. Jack looked up. The seal hunter was giving Annie a pair of fur pants. Then he handed the pair to Jack. Thanks, said Jack. He quickly pulled the pants on over his pajamas. Next, the seal hunters gave each of them a pair of fur boots and mittens. Jack took off his sneakers and pulled on the boots. He wiggled his frozen fingers into the warm mitten. I have a quick question, Jack said to the seal hunter. Do you know the answer to these riddles? He opened his notebook and read, I cover what's real and hide what's true. But sometimes I bring out the courage in you. What am I? The seal hunter shook his head. Come, he said to Jack and Annie. Then he disappeared from the window. What about those wolves out there? Jack called. But seal hunters didn't answer. Jack grabbed the Arctic book and looked for the picture of the seal hunter. When Jack found the picture, he smiled. The seal hunter was standing behind the dark sled. Jack read, in cold weather, the seal hunter traveled by dog sled. Siberian huskies often howl like wolves. A lead dog controls the others. The seal runners are sometimes made of frozen flesh, rigged up in sealskins. Hey, Annie, there's not a wolf, said Jack. There. He looked up. Annie was gone. Jack threw his book and notebook into his pack, but he was so fast in his furry clothes that the backpack wouldn't fit. Jack loosened the shoulder straps and tried to put the backpack on again. It fit. Jack looked at the small window. That would be a tight fit too. He went out the hand first and barely squeezed through it. Jack fell onto the snowy ground. The snow was still drifting down. The air was missing white. Jack heard barking and howling. He moved carefully toward the noise. At first, he couldn't see the dark sled, but when he got closer, he counted 9 Siberian huskies, then the thick furs, big heads, and pointy ears. The lead dogs barked at him. Jack stopped. He's telling you to climb down, said Annie. She was standing on the back of the sled. The seal hunter stood next to her in the snow. Jack jumped onto the sled next to Annie. Next to Annie, the seal hunter cracked the long ribs. Mush, he shouted. The husky dived off in the wall of snow. Above them flew a snowy owl. Chapter 4, Snow House. The dog sled steamed silently over the frozen tundra. The seal hunters ran alongside it. Sometimes he cracked his whip against the ice. The snowdrift looked like giant white structures as the sun slipped behind the frozen hills. Then the false orange moon rose in the sky. The moonlit light lit the small rounded igloo in front of them. The dog slowed, then stopped. Jack stepped off the sled. Annie wanted to help unhitch the dog. Jack opened his book out and read about the igloo. The word igloo means house in the language of the native Arctic peoples. The house is built with blocks of snow. Dry snow is good wall charcoal because it keeps in the heat. The temperature inside an igloo can be 65 degrees warmer than the temperature outside. Jack took out his notebook. He pulled off his mitten just long enough to write. Igloo means house. Come on, Jack, said Annie. She and the cell hunters were waiting for him in the front of the igloo. The dog were lashed together outside. Jack hurried to join them. The hunters pushed aside animal skins covering the entrance. They stepped inside. The fat candles burned brightly. Snow danced on the wall of ice and snow. Jack and Annie sat on the floor, fall-covered platforms. They watched as the seal hunter moved about. First he lit a small stove. Then he slipped outside. He came back with a snowball and chunk of frozen meat. He put the snowballs in the pot over the stove. Then he added the meat. What he making? Asked Annie. Jack pulled out his book and found a picture of the hunters cooking. He and Danny read the words silently. There was a time when nearly all of the Arctic people's foods and clothing and tools came from the Arctic animals, especially the seals. Nearly every part of the seals could be eaten. Them were filled with seal fat. Clothing was made from sealskin, and knives and needles were carved from seal bones. He must be boiling seal meat, said Jack. The poor seals, said Annie. The seal hunter looked up. They're not poor, he says. They help us because they know we would die without them. Oh, said Annie. In return, we always thank the animal's spirit, said the seal hunters. How do you do that? Said Jack. We have many special commandments, said the seal hunters. He reached under the fall-covered platform and took out the 2 wooden masks. Soon there will be a ceremony to honor the splits of the polar bears, he says. I curled the mask of the ceremony. Polar bear? Said Annie. Yes, said the hunters. Just as the seals has gave us many gifts, so has the polar bear. Like what? Said Jack. Long ago the polar bear taught us how to live in the ice and snow, said the seal hunters. Taught you? Said Jack. I mean, can you give us some fact? The seal hunter smiled. Yes, he said. The polar bear catched the seals when the seals came up to rest through the holes in the ice. The oldest seal hunter watched the polar bears and learned. This is how my father taught me how to hit seals, and his father taught him. That's a good fact, said Jack. It's the very first of my people run to make igloo from polar bears, said the hunter. Polar bear build the snow houses by digging caves in the drift. Another good fact, said Jack. Sometimes the polar bears can even teach people to fly, said the seal hunters. That's amazing fact, said Annie. Jack smiled. The rest sounded like true facts, he says, but I know that pretend. The hunter just laughed, then turned back to his cooking. That's why he wasn't surprised to hear about the treehouse, Jack thought. If he believed polar bear can fly, he probably would believe anything. The seal hunter lifted chunks of bone sealed out of his pot. He dropped them into wooden buckets to give it to Annie. Let's feed the dogs, he says. Oh boy, said Annie. She followed the hunter out, singing the buckets. Jack quickly threw his notebook and the Arctic books into his pack. He started to follow them. Then his gaze fell on the 2 bear masks. He picked them up and got a better look. Each was carved in the stripe of polar bear's face with the blue nose and rounded ears. There was 2 holes for eyes and a stripe to hold it on your head. Suddenly the hound split the air. The dogs were barking and growling. Jack's Annie squirreled. Are the dogs attacking her? Jack wondered. Annie! Still holding the bear mask, Jack turned out of the igloo. Chapter 5, Year 8. The dogs were barking wildly at the two small creatures playing in the moonlight. Polar bear babies, cried Annie. One roly-poly cubs leaped onto others. They both rolled through the snow. Hi, little bears, Annie called. The cubs jumped up and shook themselves like wet puppies. Then they scampered toward Annie, who rushed to greet them. Hi, 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 she called. Wait, shouted Jack. Where's their mothers? He looked around for the mothers, but she was nowhere in sight. Maybe there's orphans, he thought. Jack looked back at Annie. She was whistling with the little bears in the snow. She was laughing so hard that she couldn't stand. Jack started laughing too. He carefully put the bear mask into his pack. Then he ran to join Annie. She was running with the cubs across the snowy tundra. One of them raced to her, tagged her, then raced away. Annie ran after the bear to tag him back. You're it, she said. Jack and the other cubs joined in. Soon, Jack and Annie and the two cubs were all chasing each other over the moonlit snow. They ran until the two cubs fell down ahead of them. The cub lay perfectly still. Panting, Jack and Annie stared at them. Are you hurt? Annie wondered out loud. Jack and Annie ran to the cub. Just as they leaned down up to see if they were all right, the cubs jumped out. They pushed Jack and Annie over the tramples away. They were pretending, said Jack. He laughed. Jack and Annie charged after the cubs. They ran after the white tundra until they came to the frozen sea. Jack looked around. They're pretty far from the igloo. I don't hear the husky anymore, he said. Maybe we should go back. In a minute, said Annie. Look, the other cubs had suited up the snowbank. They were on the back slide down the back of the ice-covered sea. Jack and Annie laughed. It's like sledding, said Annie. Let's try it. Okay, said Jack, but then we have to go back. Jack followed Annie out the snowbank. He charged his pack into his arm. Annie lay on her back. She whooped as she slid down the ice. Jack followed her. Watch out below, he shouted. The little bears were sitting at the bottom of the snowbank. One gently rapped Jack in the face with her furry paws. Then she lay down. I'm tired too, said Annie. Yeah, said Jack. Let's rest for just a minute. Jack and Annie looked up at the orange moons as they lay beside the cubs. All they could hear was the wind and the soft breathing of the cub. That was fun, said Annie. It was, said Jack, but we better head back to Igloo. The seal hunter probably looking for us. Plus, we have to solve the riddles. Jack rolled onto his side and tried to sound. Crack. Uh-oh, he said. He went back down to his knees. I think we're on the thin ice. What do you mean, said Annie. She started to stand. Another crack rang out. Uh-oh, she says. She carefully lay back down again. She lay back down. The polar bear cubs moved closer to Jack and Annie. They made little crying sounds. Jack wanted to cry too, but he took a deep breath. Let's see what our book says, he said. He reached into his pack for the Arctic books. He found the mask out first and handed them to Jack. Annie, I took those from the igloo by mistake, he said, and he started to reach for his Arctic books. He found the loudest crack of all. Crack! We're not even moving and the ice is cracking, said Annie. Just then there was a new sound, a low snoring sound. It came from the top of the snowbank, about 50 feet away. Jack looked up. Jack looked up. Staring down at them was a giant polar bear. The polar bear mother, whispered Annie. Chapter 6. Flying Bears. The cubs whimpered loud. They want to go to her, but they're afraid of ice, whispered Jack. Annie patted the cubs. Don't be afraid, Jack, she told them. You'll go back to your mothers. The big polar bear growled. She paced back and forth, sniffing the air. Annie kept patting the two cubs and whispering to them. Jack looked in the books for anything that might help. Finally, he found something. Even though the female polar bears can weigh as much as 750 pounds, she can walk on ice too thin to hold a person by balancing her weight and sliding her paws over the ice. Oh man, is that incredible, said Jack. He watched the mother polar bear walk down the snowbank. On the large silent feet, she crept about and at the edge of the frozen sea. She tried to step on the ice, but each time she did, it cracked, and she had to retreat. At last, he found the framed spot. Then the polar bear stretched out her fur legs and lay down on the ice. So slowly she moved forward, pushing herself with her paw. Is she coming for her baby? Said Jack. Or is coming to get us? I don't know, said Annie. Hey, let's put on the mask. What for? Said Jack. Maybe they'll protect us, said Annie. Maybe they'll think we're polar bear too. Oh, brother, said Jack. But Annie gave him a bear mask. He took off his glasses and slipped it on. Jack peered through the mask holes. It was hard to see the huge white bear sliding over the frozen sea. He squinted. That's how. The polar bear looked at her cubs and let out a deep moan. The two little bears carefully went to their mother. She licked the cubs and thrust her nose against each other's. Then they crawled onto her back. They're safe now, said Jack. Even if Mother breaks through the ice, she can swim with them to the shore. Yeah, I just wish you wouldn't leave us behind, said Annie. The mother bear slowly turned her body around. Then she pushed off with her hind legs. With her cubs on her back, she began to sliding down. Let's try moving like her, Annie said. But we could break through the freeze to death, said Jack. If we just stay here, we'll freeze too, said Annie. Remember, the seal hunter said that his peoples has learned from the polar bears. Jack took a deep breath. Okay, he says, let's try it. He laid on his stomach. He sprayed down his arms and legs. Then he copied the bear. He pressed his mitten against the ice and pushed up, sliding his feet. Amazingly, there was no cracking sound. Grrr, he growled. Then he pushed up again. Jack heard Annie sliding behind him. He kept going. He pushed and slid. He pushed again and slid again. He made the movements over and over until something happened. He didn't feel like a boy anymore. He felt like a polar bear. Then Jack felt something even stronger. He felt like flying polar bear. Jack rolled along as if his arms and legs were gently wings, and the moonlit sea ice was the glassy sky. He remembered what the seal hunter had said. Polar bear can fly. Chapter 7. Split Light. Jack, you can get up now, said Annie. Jack opened his eyes. Annie was standing over him. She still has her mask on. We're safe ground, she says. Jack felt if he has been dreaming. He looked around. They had reached the tundra at the edge of the frozen sea. The cubs were roaming in the distance, but their mother was still nearby, gazing at Jack and Annie. She waited to make sure we were safe, said Annie. Jack stared at the polar bear in awe. The words of seal still hunters came back to him. Always thank the animal spirits. We should thank the polar bear spirit now, he says. Of course, said Annie. Jack trembled to his feet. Still wearing his bear mask, he stood before the polar bear and pressed his hands together. We thank you, he said, bowing. Yes, we thank you forever, said Annie, also bowing. We thank you beyond the moons and the stars, said Jack, and beyond the deepest sea, Annie added. Then she threw out her arms and whirled around. Jack did the same. They both bounced around the snow, hurrying the bears. Finally, they stopped and bowed one last time. When they looked up, the polar bear rose up on her hind legs. She was twice as tall as Jack. She lowered her huge head as if she was bowing back to them. At that moment, the sky exploded. The night became the great scrolls of red, green, and purple lights. It looked like a candy coming from the magic lamp. The sight took Jack's breath away. He stared in wonder as the dazzling light lit the timber. It's like a polar bear spirit? Annie asked in the hushed voice. As far as Jack could see, the sky was snow streamers. Even the bears were streamers in the strange light. No, it's not a spirit, said Jack. There's going to be a scientific reason. I'll find out. Shaking, he reached into his backpack and pulled out the Arctic book. He found off his bear mask and pulled on his glasses. By the greenish glow, Jack found a picture of the skylight. The picture didn't come close to the real thing. He read aloud. Most amazing sights in the Arctic is the northern lights. Its rolls of the lights is causing by electrically charged panels from the snow striking atoms and molecules in the Earth's atmosphere. See, there is a scientific reason, said Jack. It's not a spirit. Then suddenly all the dancing lights are gone, as if someone has blown the candle. The magic had ended. Chapter 4. Riddle Solved. Now only moon saw on the snow. Jack looked around for the polar bears. She was gone. Where'd she go? Said Annie. I don't know, said Jack. He looked over the tundra. There was no sign of giant bear or her cub. Maybe she's not interested in scientific reasons, Jack said. Annie sighed. She took off her bear mask and handed it to Jack. He put both their masks in his pack. Now what? Annie asked. They both around. Their best filled of the snow and in darkness. Jack has no idea where they are. He shrugged. I guess we just have to walk and hope for the best. Wait, listen, said Annie. From the distance came howling sound. They grew louder and louder. Yay, we don't have to wait along, said Annie. The huskies are coming. Howling filled the night as the dog sleds coming into view. The seal hunters were running behind it. We're here, over here, called Jack. He ran toward the sled. Annie followed. I was afraid you were lost, said the seal hunter. We were, said Annie, and we got stuck on thin ice too. But polar bear help us. Yeah, said Jack, and we wear your mask and they make us feel like bears. Yeah, and the mask made us brave, said Annie. She caught her breath. Oh man, wait, said Jack. Annie's words sounded familiar. He took out his notebook and read the Morgan riddle aloud. I cover the reels and hide its truth, but sometimes I bring out the courage in you. What am I? A mask, Jack and Annie said together. The seal hunter smiled. You knew, said Annie. It was for you to discover, said the cell hunters, not me. Jack pulled the bear mask out of his backpack. Here, he says, thank a lot. The hunters took the mask and put them inside his parka. We can go home now, said Jack. Do you mind taking us back to treehouse, said Annie. The seal hunter shook his head. Climb down, he says. Jack and Annie climbed onto the dog sled. Mush, said the seal hunters. Mush, said Annie. Mush, said Jack. Snow began to fall as they took off across the dark sky. Chapter 9. Oh no, one more. By the time the duck sled arrived at the treehouse, the snow has become blizzard. Can you wait just a minute, Jack, said the seal hunter, so we can check something? The hunter nodded. His dog went as Jack and Danny climbed through the treehouse window. Jack grabbed the scroll that has a riddle. He unrolled it. The riddle was gone. In its place was the one shimmering word, mask. We did it, said Annie. The treehouse will take us home now. Great, said Jack. Let's say goodbye to the seal hunter and gave him back his clothes. They quickly pulled off their sealskin clothes and their boots. Thanks for letting us borrow this, Jack called through the window. The seal hunter walked to the treehouse and took the clothes from Jack and Danny. They stood shivering in their pajamas and bare feet. Thanks for everything, said Annie, her teeth chattering. The seal hunter gave them a wave. Then he walked through the rolling snow in his sled. Mush, he shouted. This dog took off through the stormy night. Let's get out of here, Jack said. He hugged himself. Before we freeze to death. Annie grabbed the Pennsylvania book that always take them home. She pointed to the picture of the Broccoli Wood. I wish we could go there, she said. They waited for the treehouse to start spinning. Nothing happened. Jack shivered. I wish we could go there, Annie said again. Again, nothing happened. What's going on? Said Jack. He looked around the treehouse. The 4 squirrels with the squirrel little answer was in the corner. Then he saw it. The 5th squirrel. Where did that come from? He said. Jack grabbed it and unrolled it. On there was a world. Look at the ladders. The first, not the rest. Discover the place that you love the best. Oh no, said Annie. Another riddles. Okay. Let's say comes. Jack said, shivering. Look at the letters. The first, not the rest. Okay, the first letter in the riddles are LATLT. That doesn't make sense, said Annie, broke in. Ice wins better the treehouse. Snow blazed inside. We have to hurry, said Annie. Jack was freezing. He looked around wildly. Ladders. What ladders? He said. His gaze rested on the squirrels in the corner. Maybe we should look at the letters of the answer, he says. Right, said Annie. They both unrolled the scrolls. The scroll from their adventures under the ocean said oysters. The scroll from their trips to the home west says echo. The scroll from their journey into Africa says honey. Their scroll from the Arctic says mask. Oysters, echo, honey, mask, said Jack. Their first letters are OEHM. That doesn't make any sense either, said Annie. Yeah, but maybe we have to unscramble those letters, said Jack. OEHM. They can spell hemo or miho, said Annie. Or home, said Jack. Home, cried Annie. That's the place we love the best. Jack unrolled the first 5th scroll again. The riddle was gone. In its place was the one shimmering word, home. Yay! Cried Annie. She grabbed the Pennsylvania book. I wish we could go home. Home, home, home. The treehouse started to spin. It spun faster and faster. Then everything was still. Absolutely still. Chapter 10. Master Librarians. Warm air washed over Jack. It felt wonderful. We have started in your quest, said the soft something voice. Are you glad to be home? Jack opened his eyes. Morgan's face stood in the moonlight. Yes, he said. We solved all our riddles, said Annie. Indeed, said Morgan. You have proved that you can find the answer in the very hard questions. She reached into the fold of her robes and took out the two things placed on the wood. The magic library card for each of you, she says. She gave one to Annie's and one to Jack. Oh man, said Jack, filling the card. The wooden card was as thin and smooth as an ordinary library card. On its surface, shimmering the letter M and L. Those are your Master Librarian's cards, said Morgan. You're the newest members of the ancient roughly of my Master Librarians. What do we do with them? Asked Jack. Take them on to your future journey, said Morgan. Only the very wise person or another Master Librarians will be able to see the letters. Those will be the people who can help you. Oh, wow, said Annie. Can we go to the mission right now? Now you must go home and rest, said Morgan. I will come back for you soon. Jack and Annie put their secret card in their pockets, and then Jack took out the attic book and put it with the other book. Goodbye, he says. See you soon, Annie said to Morgan, and Morgan gave a little wave. Jack and Annie climbed down the rope ladder. As soon as they climbed onto the dark ground, they heard a roll. They looked up. There was a blur of winds and the light high in the oak tree. Then all was silent. Morgan's and her magic treehouse was gone. Jack reached for his magic library's card. Then he felt his tiny warmer. He knew that amazing adventure lay ahead. Let's go, he said. He turned on his flashlight. The wood doesn't feel scary like they did before, said Annie as they walked through the street. I'm not afraid anymore. Me neither, said Jack. Hey, the darkness is like a mask, said Annie. Yeah, said Jack. It's hide the day, but bring out your courage. They came out of the woods. Jack saw their house in the distance. It looked warm and cozy. The porch light glowed. The moon shone over home. Home, he whispered. Home, said Annie. He started running. Jack took off after her, running to the place that they both loved the best. Jack took off after her.